Ladies and gentlemen, we ask that you please take your seats at this time as the program will begin momentarily.
Formative and summative evaluation, or tasting the soup versus serving it to guests. So what is formative and summative evaluation? I think there's an easy little reminder in the title already. So formative evaluation typically you use it when you try to form or shape a product, or you want to try to find out which parts work well and which parts of your design or of your product don't work well. So you taste the soup, you shape the soup while you cook it. And in the summative evaluation, this is the actual test. You present it to users and you measure the performance. Of course, you typically in participatory design, you already present your product before to users. That is what you always should do. And there's a lot of discussion and of course a widespread common sense that you should do participatory design, so to involve your end users as early as possible in your developments. But of course the evaluation part and the research part for formative and summative is different. So think about shaping a product and then actually at the end giving it to end users and see how it performs. So formative studies often work with qualitative data, but this is not necessarily the case. A good example is the system usability score, which is a kind of inventory of 10 or 11 simple questions which give you a good indicator in a kind of quantitative data about the usability and the learnability of your products when you develop software, for example. On the other hand, in summative studies, you often work with quantitative data. You want to measure the performance, but nevertheless, it also helps to work here either with mixed method approaches or also to collect qualitative data. So what are typical formative research methods? So in formative research, especially in longer term projects, you think of iterative designs or also transformative designs. You think of several iterations where you look at different aspects of your product and how to design them. And you collect data on the relevance of certain features or characteristics, the importance of those, and probably also design different variants of your products. So, and typical methods are design workshops at the beginning, so talk to your users, understand what their actual need is. Then you start with paper pencil prototyping or other ways of software-based prototyping. You go into interviews, into focus groups, so you interact a lot with your users. You do agile development of your product, and you always involve that kind of evaluation aspect and research aspect into it to actually at the end then go more towards the summative evaluation. So in earlier or later methods, then you can of course do also interaction analysis to understand more what users are actually doing with your products. And you of course, a very interesting and important aspect is also contextual analysis. So try to understand what happens in the environment. So on the other hand, typical summative research methods, which are often at the cycle of the end of the development cycle, they focus on the performance of a solution in a target context. So you have to take into account the users, the context, the situation, the tasks they have to perform with it. So of course, in this sense also, these solutions can then set up specific tasks you have to perform. This is a typical setup in these kind of performance-oriented evaluations. In some cases, it's also possible to do real experimental studies. You can also work with quasi-experimental studies. And you typically look at different versions of the products and different treatments that the users or contexts perform in. So a lot of the focus or the keyword here is you look at the performance of actually your result, your research result. So a very comparable issue, and I just raised the labels here, you find also in formative versus summative assessment in education. So of course in education we have a lot of summative assessment. So at the end of a seminar you assessed on your performance. But on the other hand, what becomes more and more important is also formative assessment that helps so well the educator as also the learner to shape the learning process towards the right direction. So, but here you find the same example. So the formative part is like shaping the learning process, shaping the outcome. And in the other hand, the summative assessment looks at the performance at the end. So to take away, formative assessment shapes the product. It helps you to develop research questions, to identify your conceptual framework. You can do several iterations with different types of data. As said, you typically often start with qualitative methods, but you can also use quantitative methods if you already know what you're striving towards. And the summative parts, it takes a defined design product to an evaluation context and looks at the performance of this product or of your model in a specific context. Thank you.